And you'll hear in a bit, I have a secondary why that I also have learned the hard way over the years, that also a holistic, healthy life and family is also a primary lever to create change, that the health of society rarely rises above the level of the health of the businesses and the families in that society. So that's my why.
Yeah, and that's a good one. So over to you, Bob, and also I'll mention the nonprofit that you run, Guitars Over Guns, and I would love to have you also touch on that. So, but yeah, your why and your legacy with family offices. What we'll unpack before we jump to Bob is what we'll unpack is, why family office? What does this mean to startups? If you're sitting in the audience, you're like, should I know about this? What does this mean? How should I think about this? Especially in a changing and I think disruptive time relative to how startups capitalize. So with that, Bob, your why.
Well, first I want to grow up and be like Lonnie and all three of those guys. That was a great panel. Welcome everybody. My why is just having an almost extraordinarily blessed life and career that comes pretty much from the resilience of having to deal with some tragedies. But my dad's dad died when he was 13. And that was a pretty profound part of his world for us growing up with a dad who had to drop out from the 9th grade, and education was everything. So we were sort of implored to really drive our educational values. And we kind of brought home A's, not because you were punished if you didn't. We brought him home because he was so overjoyed when you did, because he knew that was the ticket to success. And, I always thought he was the, greatest dad in the world, but without an education, didn't think it was academically anything. And then at one point when I was 13, he asked me to help him study for a securities exam. He decided that that was a decent way to make some money. So by the way, with the 9th grade education, all you can really do is lift, heavy things or sell. Fortunately, he was one of the great listeners of the world, so he could sell anything because he cared so much about who he listened to. So that's kind of foundational because when he asked me to help him with this exam, at the end of the weekend going through, remember the mimeograph paper that you would pick up and smell? So one full weekend's worth of asking him all those questions, he took the exam and he got 897 out of 900 right. And so it kind of changed my view of my pop. The race forward to the next issue is that he then passed away at 53. I was in my 20s and the oldest of 5 kids. And the thing that just kept driving me crazy was that my kid brother, who would have been 14, and all the rest of my siblings between us, I was the oldest, got only a fraction of him. I got all of them, at least for my life. And so I just started to record everything that I could think of about the way he parented us. And his biggest issue was find a passion. I don't care if you're a garbage man, be the best, and you will be making a living doing something that you're happy with. Mm-hmm. And if you do that, you'll eventually give back, and that's the cycle we're looking for. And if it's passion, you can't turn it into a vocation, call it a hobby and go on to something else. And again, pretty foundational stuff. So it really provided for me the ability to take risk always, because, and that's one of the things you heard about our panelists before. If you are mentored at home that there should be no fear of failure, but actually celebration of it as a stepping stone to success, it is amazing how empowering that is. Mm-hmm. And so that really kind of, without me knowing it until many years later, unleashed an extraordinary career that started with IBM. So I had a pretty good grounding in technology as a start. And for any of you that remember IBM in the 70s and 80s, their training program was worse than the Marine Corps. 27% were the graduates of every training class, which never made much sense to me for all the money they spent on recruiting. But Big Blue is Big Blue. And then I had a series of evolutions career-wise that wound up ultimately into institutional money management and really kind of dedicating my focus on being a fiduciary. And once you take the responsibility that you're always putting somebody else ahead of you, it separates almost the entire world who are looking for some kind of a quick sell or their own issue or reason for doing something. And that allowed me to build an incredible network. And it was institutional money management. So that meant I had the great fortune of traveling around the world and visiting with heads of state, whose sovereign funds we were managing. And all this is just by way of saying that when I finally got to the point where two big firms in the money management area, Brinson Partners in Delaware, each sold. Both of them were pretty good sized liquidity events for me. And I remember coming home to tell the boys that I was quitting. And we had a beautiful house on the lake in Chicago. And they said, well, does that mean we have to move? And I said, no, but you guys have heard of trust funds? Oh, yeah, we've heard of trust funds. I said, well, trust me, there aren't any funds for you. It was the defining moment to say, your mom and I are at a point where if we manage the money we have well, we can start taking some risks and doing the things we'd like to do. The guys talked about that empowerment. And then that was the start of our family office now 25 years ago. And there was a whole series of opportunities, but the biggest and best and most fun for me was starting up Guitars Over Guns with my oldest son, who's a terrific global renowned trombone player. And this organization was the first time I could build a company from start that was not for profit. And, it's still mission, vision, values, improving your metrics. So 17 years later and 15,000 kids whose lives we've changed, it's really been quite profound.
Yeah, no, it's pretty impressive. And I would just say, I'll just talk on behalf of Mike Steep. So Mike Steep is the really the progenitor, the idea behind it, as he had started the Stanford Engineer Disruptive Technology Program. You both were part of the Stanford Engineer Disruptive Technology Program. And for 3 years, you ran an amazing conference that had significant incomes. You're here tonight because you're going to be doing a similar thing in 2026 in San Diego. And so, when you think about this community that's comprised of educators, academics, students, innovators in hardware and deep tech, what is the number one thing that you would want to share about the mechanism of family offices? And again, we talked about, capitalizing your startup is probably the most challenging part of business. What's different about family office? Why should they care? And, maybe we start with you, Alani.
Sure. Yeah, for those of you that aren't familiar with family offices, essentially just a family that has done well in business and investments and creates what is effectively a business around the business of managing the family's assets, right? And what is fascinating to me as an entrepreneur that has at times in early stages relied on venture capital to now being on the other side and being on the funding side more often than not of new ventures is the difference between short-term and long-term thinking. And what you'll find uniquely with family office money is that we tend to generally have that long-term view. We're not in this because we need to just make another buck. We're in this because we're trying to create a legacy multiple generations from now that we'll be proud of, right? And what I find is that entrepreneurs love working with that kind of capital. So with the Alliance for Societal Impact, we're creating this ecosystem where we can connect that kind of long-term investment, values-driven investment mindset with entrepreneurs, with brilliant innovators who have ideas and businesses that can move the dial in society toward good over generations, potentially, right? And those are the kind of plays that we love making. And so our alliance is connecting that kind of family office ecosystem and capital with those innovators that really also are purpose driven and care about that long-term impact and have the passion behind their purpose. Because I'm telling you, when and I'm sure you're the same, Bob, when you evaluate investments, the number one thing I look for is in the founders is their clear what we call spiritual capital. Don't go woo-woo on me. That's like, is there this spirit that is driving them? That is the most important form of capital, right? Do they have a value center? They have a purpose that's going to carry them through those absolutely insane startup phases, right? And those deep dark nights that it takes to be successful, and give them that resilience, right? So when we see that, and then of course it's got to be paired with the fundamentals that it takes to be successful in business, right? That's a given. That's just the bottom rung, right?
Yeah. Got to achieve that.
Yeah. So we're trying to pair the best of those worlds through this alliance. And so, yeah, we'd love to have you, especially if you're innovators. We'll have a part of this event coming up here in the spring in San Diego. We'll be able to showcase some innovations in front of other family office investors and look for some people we can run with in the long run.
Yeah.
Well said. The heart of the alliance itself are these enterprise level families that really have the kind of capital that can really make the impact in the areas that matter most. So you have to take a big step back and think of these major family enterprises. And we're talking about, in many cases, literally billionaire level families. And at the heart of our world today, we're at probably the deepest geopolitical divide we've ever witnessed. Yet we've been deeply politically divided for 260, 50, 40 years, whatever we are now. But this seems a little more profound. And what raises the stakes is AI itself. If you ask any one of these major families what the biggest risk that actually exists today, it's who wins the AI world geopolitically. And so China is the only enemy that actually matters. For those of you keeping score, they've been around 6,000 plus 7,000 years. Russia and Iran and the rest are kind of bit players in the grand scheme. And we need to figure out how to coexist with China. So what the alliance is really looking to do, stemming off of what we accomplished at Stanford, was for the first time, we thought about sustainability not just as environmental, which there's no question we're scarring the planet. We got to figure out what to do with it. But there's so much dis and misinformation about energy, about carbon footprints, about everything. So the question is, how do you build a community of such trust where each member of the alliance is capable of effectively determining whether all the rest of the members are bringing something to the table? So this is what makes what we're looking for unique. This is the ultimate why for all three of us, because we all recognize that at the heart it's geopolitical. We have to win that war. Environmental, certainly. And the last existential risk is the risk of family itself as an institution. And just as Lonnie described, all these things that really bind families together. We have $70 trillion that's about to go over the transom from my generation to the rest of every one of you under 65. And so most of that could well be squandered when the second generation and third behind them feel like the parents did a great job building all this wealth, but they outsourced the parenting. And in that, there's a lot of vulnerability. So a lot of that money could well be squandered. And the alliance is about all three legs of this stool: the big risk of winning the big war, the environment, and the family structure.
Yeah. And so a way to think about practical application of these incredibly large ideas is weaving in academic leaders, folks who have really deep insights of these verticals, of these industries, things like cybersecurity and so forth. So maybe we talk just a little bit about what that academic role is. And
Go ahead, Bobby.
Well, so again, we accomplished something extraordinary at Stanford in terms of bringing these three sort of circles around purpose to bear. But one of the things, and this is what makes Mike Steep a great partner, Mike is really the technology side of this whole thing. So Mike was a Microsoft engineer, literally sat in Gates's office, had a tremendous amount to do with the evolution of Windows, and most importantly, Microsoft being enterprise oriented, actually selling the very solutions it was using for itself to manage its own business was where he was at the heart. And then he went on after retiring from Microsoft to develop the Palo Alto Research Center, and then moved to Stanford's almost 4 or 5 times the number of tech centers that Stanford has, and finding a way to essentially help the professors at Stanford get direct access to opportunities where their research could be commercialized. 80% of those PhDs don't know how to run a P&L. So Mike's big thing was, you got to show me a 10x return on the research dollars in 2 years. If you can't do that, there's no point in going further. And what that did was created for the partners that were using that technology, of which I was one for a business deal, and effectively disintermediated the McKinseys and Bains of the world, who take that very same research and upcharge it to $2 to $3 million for what would be 100, 200 grand chair or endowment. And so that is exactly what now is going to move forward, except we all learned in the Stanford experience that university administrations are kind of all about the fundraising, and everything goes there. So Mike decided that the other sort of disintermediation in order to really get the trust circles built was to go to MIT and Caltech and Wharton and Northwestern and Harvard and have the PhDs across the board be a collection of academic truth. So peer review is critical. And that is really what matters. And so Mike is there to help curate and determine that whatever engineering research activity is happening, and you all as the innovators, as Cheryl and Lonnie have said, that second day of this first conference we're going to do will be all about that innovation. So that's really, I think, the thing that draws this crowd back to
Right.
back to us.
And I would also say too is that when we think about startup culture, especially startup culture in San Diego, we do tend to celebrate San Diego for sake of San Diego, which is, hey, I think it's the best town there is. You know, I think there's varying stats that say we're number 5 in startup innovation, and some lists say number 10. But wherever you land, whatever research you read, is we are a top 10. We are number 1 in biotech. We, lead in mobile thanks to Qualcomm. UCSD as an institution is, awe-inspiring, top school for engineering. So it is really, what is that room for expanded innovation for the San Diego ecosystem? And that's part of the solution as well, which is why San Diego is very much intentionally designed, and why that conference will be happening here. So anything further to kind of add on that regional aspect or global?
No, I would just say, echo what you said, that San Diego is clearly one of the top 10. And I've done a lot of real estate investment over my years, and right now it's one of the primary areas that we like to look to invest in real estate, because we believe that the future is here.
Yeah.
There's so much optimism about the future of what innovation and technology is going to do for this region, that it's becoming, as many of you probably know, if you invest in real estate, it's becoming pretty hot.
And I would say, the mission of Startup San Diego, especially with the X platform this year, and I think you could probably talk to any board member, Ping or Curling, or, anyone in the ecosystem, is that, I don't think we're parochial. I think we're leading edge. And I think platforms like Startup X, which that was the platform where we would open it up. We've had so many people come down from Silicon Valley and from LA, and obviously you guys have flown in as well. And I think that's part of the rise, is greater global interconnectivity, greater connectivity with other hubs. So.
Yeah, I think the other thing that really is critical to this crowd is the nature of capital itself for startups. So, the venture capital world, as you know, lives and dies on their institutional money for the most part, and has 6, 8, 10 years, and then they need to have a liquidity event, et cetera. The family office world, and there are several of the families that I and others are very close to this concept, not of venture capital or vulture capital, but builder capital. Builder capital comes from families who want to see from incubation all the way through the stages, stay with it. Families investing with long-term horizons. I've said this a million times. Of all the startups I've seen that failed, I've never seen one fail because of reasons disclosed in a offering memorandum. They closed for something out of left field that you never saw coming, and the only way they survive is the quality of the cap table. Because if you have this kind of passion, this kind of commitment, you have a vision, you believe your whole world is about whatever the purpose is that you've defined, your cap table is going to give you the latitude and the additional capital to keep you going. That is not venture oriented. And that's a really significant reason why, whether it's San Diego, I live in Miami. Miami is the parallel. I mean, that's why I love coming here. It's literally, we're the true growth cities. Technology is driving both of our evolutions, and it's really cool to watch. And you got someone like an Erwin Jacobs, who's the kind of founder almost of the tech world here, and it's invigorating.
Yeah, not only tech world too, it's just the art side. Every major theater, every cultural icon in this town has the Jacobs name on it. And I guess this is why it's so resonant, is to have Erwin Jacobs, as someone, a longtime Qualcommer, myself, to have him on this stage last year. He was resonating a lot of those same themes. And it's, it's not about transactional, it's about, can you build into the community legacy plus culture, which is, I think, why it's pretty cool. You do your guitars over guns. I keep saying guitars over guns because I said guns over guitars earlier, and I'm trying to emphasize that we do want the music, not the murder. Okay, so with that, but I also want to just double click on Lonnie. So Lonnie, you're a 2-time author. You had, your first book was Beyond Business. Maybe you could touch on that a bit. And then you have another book called Beyond Fortune. So speaking to those timeless truths beyond transaction, give us a brief on Beyond Business and then the second pending book.
First of all, I'm not an author at the core. I'm a business guy. But I do like to learn, and I learn best when I write and journal. Yeah. And so that's where Beyond Business came from. I kind of have a wacky background. I was raised as a pastor's kid in this home where I thought that the best, if not the only way to make the world better was to be a pastor. So I started on that path, and my formal education's in theology, believe it or not. But pretty quickly I realized that my real passion was making a tangible difference in the world, and I figured I probably do that better through business. Couldn't get a job because of my education. Nobody, where do you hire somebody with a theology degree? So I had to start a business, and that started me down this path of 40 some years ago, being an entrepreneur, and just fell in love with the process of building leaders teams that made a difference, a tangible difference in the world, like really shaped society. But it felt a little bit guilty, like I left somehow some higher, cool calling or whatever. And so over a lot of journaling and talking to a lot of successful leaders who would really move the dial in society through their businesses, I came to this firm belief that I articulate in the book Beyond Business, that business is indeed the primary platform to shape the world, especially when it's done by leaders who understand how business works and are disciplined to the fundamentals of business. I call that level 1 business. And most of you, if you're in business, you're in level 1. You're providing a good product or service, hopefully at a profit eventually, right? And you're doing great work for society. If you're paying employees, you're helping society, right? If you're supporting suppliers, you're helping society, right? If you're, providing taxes, hopefully you're helping society. Okay, sometimes you might question that, but literally, when we just build a business, we're improving society, right? So that's level 1. But level 2 is what I call building beyond business, where you get past that point of just creating the fundamentals of business, and you can start to really go the extra mile to build value into the lives of your employees, your customers, your stakeholders in the business. And that starts becoming really rewarding. And then we have what we call a level 3 that we teach in businesses we invest in, where you actually move past that and you start to intentionally invest time, effort, strategy into elements of your business that can actually transform society from a causal, systemic perspective, right? So, I mean, just a basic of that, like in one of our core businesses, we, for years, we did things, extra mile things for employees. Like, we would pay our, thousands of employees to take time and go through courses that we created internally to help them develop their personal values, their personal life mission, right? And develop a personal strategy for enhancing their individual lives, right? And sometimes investors are like, why? What does that have to do with business? But it so engaged our team in the value of this community and our business that they were part of. We were building beyond business, but it was truly building our business in the process, right? And then we went to, contributing a percentage of our profits into a giving pool each year that we would divide for years. We divided up in multiple businesses, our employees in giving teams, and each giving team gets a percentage of the company's profits each year, and they're self-directed cross-functional teams, and they get to choose the cause that they give to, and it became a competition. Our Christmas parties were like crazy over the moon because that's when we would announce these things. And so instead of just the normal boring Christmas party, we have slideshows and nonprofits coming in and people, our teams, giving teams, talking about the significant impact. And like spouses come to these and not a dry eye in the audience, right? Because they realize that this business is not just about making another buck. We're intentional about giving back. So that's level 2. But level 3 is like some of our business now. One of our businesses we have, like, we're very intentional now. Level 2 was giving to this cause that this business cares about, solving the problem of orphans, right? Did a lot of cool stuff there. Level 3 is now doing some really cool things through our business and our connections and our influence to solve what we call the parentless pandemic, the global parentless pandemic, right? That's level 3 type of transformation. So I just want to encourage you as entrepreneurs, start with that vision of how can you use your business ultimately to transform society, but give yourself grace to go through the levels. That's why we've defined this paradigm. Like just earlier this week, I was coaching one of our CEOs of a business we've got a pretty substantial investment in. And he's 3 years in, he's got over 100 employees now. And, we've talked about this for 3 years. And he kept saying, but Lonnie, we're just trying to make a profit. Give me a break. I said, I get it. But I want to make sure you keep that vision in front of you and your team. So this week, for the first time, they finally are actually making a legitimate profit. They're super excited. And this week, he said, for the first time, our entire leadership team went to a whole another level of engagement, because now we're talking about doing these, and he listed specific level 2 things and a vision they have for level 3, where they're really going to move the dial on a certain aspect of society in their business. So it's a journey. Give yourself that grace to go through the journey, but start with the vision.
And I think we heard that too from all of our prior unicorns on the panel, right? And that was not a prompting to, curate a theme. This was from the heart from each of these CEOs and CTOs, which I love about that people are being more intentional about the human impact. Earlier when we were talking, we talked about, what kind of technology is AI creating? What kind of technology are we creating? And I think it was you, Lonnie, maybe it was Bob, but you said, what kind of humans are we creating, right? And I think that is at the essence of what the Alliance for Societal Impact is kind of take that macro level view of the impact that you're having on humanity through not only jobs, but how you're raising children. That comes back to legacy, which I believe as the end of the day, Bob, is the family offices are really looking to leave legacy and to equip future generations. So maybe we land on that response there. And then we didn't plan on doing questions, but I do see we have a mic, so maybe we take a few questions too. So go ahead and we'll jump on that, Bob.
The only thing I would say, being invested on both sides of AI at this stage is that I kind of put AI into two camps at this, especially for this audience. One is true generative AI, writing code, and programming that code in a way that you get what in one of the firms that is doing kind of a complete disruption of the search engine optimization world. What would have taken a year just 2 years ago was done in a weekend 3 weeks ago. And the pace with which that kind of company can jump up into the leaderboard world, that is truly where you can get outsized valuation because there's real drive and purpose. You can see where that code might go, and you don't really need revenue because all your time really needs to be spent in provisionally and then fully patenting the things that you've done. And then, testing it across the world, deep seeking each of the ones behind you. Very excited about that world. That's, in my view, 5% of what the world of us need. We need the digital to human handshake. We need AI to create massive productivity increases that drive work-life balance. And that's where legacy will be ultimately created. And again, where a group like this can kind of coalesce around that. But the big issue is that there's just too much hallucination to trust what's happening. The biggest issue we have is the trust. And I go back again, if we can't create, in our case, this alliance, I don't care whose alliance it might be, but we have to find those of us with different enough backgrounds, with academic peer review, with all of the rigor necessary to keep beating something down until there's nothing left that proves that it is real and that it can be relied upon. And only in that world can people be free enough to really use the AI in the first place. And that's kind of a cycle, a virtuous cycle that we're hopefully aiming for.
Yeah, well said. So if someone wants to ask a question, we have 2.5 minutes left. And if not, I'll just wait. Oh, yeah, right there. The mic's up here. So you got to walk down, and I can run you my mic too. I need some steps. All right, there you go. Thanks. Thank you for curling.
He's there. He's got it right there. You got it.
But be ready, Carl.
So you're talking about, hello?
Eat the mic, as we musicians say.
You're talking about creating societal good. What if your business goes against the agenda of corporate America in terms of providing societal good? Do you still go with it? Do you fear for your life, or how do you proceed?
That's a great question, and the answer is yes. Sometimes I fear for my life when I go against the common narrative. But what counts is if you're feeling compelled to move the dial in some area of society, go for it, right? Follow your passion, because particularly in this right now, AI, robotics, disruptive tech is rewriting the rules of business, faster than any of us expected. And what we need now more than ever is entrepreneurs like you who have the guts to follow the convictions of their heart, right? Because when you do that, that's the best assurance that we have that technology will not take us over the edge of ethics, and that it will be driven by purpose and not just by profit, right? And as you well know, I don't know, obviously, any of the details you're talking about. My guess is that some of the agendas you're talking about are largely driven by profit. And I believe me, I love profit. I love profit. Okay, so profit, though, it has to be viewed for sustainable success. And by that, I mean, especially over the generations, it has to be viewed as the fuel for good purpose. And it takes guys like you who have the guts to stand up against the norm and say, this is a purpose I believe in funding.
Or build the AI that exposes the poor values that are in another piece of AI. Either one is helpful.
All right. Well, that was a great question. We have 30 seconds left. I don't know if someone can ask and respond in that time frame. So maybe we just land this.
We'll be here. Right? We'll be right here afterwards.
Yeah, that's right. And so we
People
do
need a
have
bar.
ASI will be hosting this evening's cocktail hosted, and just shout out to Lisa Barnhouse, our executive director, for all of her support for that. And it looks like she's got something pretty nice for you guys too.
Can I share
Yeah,
one
please do.
closing? I just want to share a closing thought here, which I wasn't planning to, but based on the theme here. I had a conversation yesterday afternoon that it's one of those conversations you wish you never would have had, but you cherish forever. My wife and I have a dear friend, Mark, who is in hospice. And he told his wife, I want to have one more conversation before the morphine takes me under completely, and I can't have a conversation anymore. And he said, I want to have it with Lonnie and Shelley, my wife. And you have to understand, Mark is a guy that for over 40 years now, done multiple businesses with, multiple investments, traveled together, done holidays together. They never had kids, so they adopted our 4 kids, and our 7 grandkids now are like theirs. We're having this last conversation, and through laughter and tears, Mark started to slur his words a bit, and I knew it was probably the last sentences I'd hear from my friend. And I said, Mark, do you have just one last word of wisdom for me? Because he's a guy where many times he always carried 3x5 cards, and I was 2 pens in his pocket. He jokes, said, last week's first time I haven't had 2 pens in my pocket. And it wouldn't be uncommon for him to write down a word of wisdom and hand it to me in a meeting or something. So I said, Mark, you have one word of wisdom at the end. And he didn't give me a word of wisdom. He said, I want you guys to know that what I appreciate most is the blessing that your spiritual friendship and you being a guide in our lives has meant to us. And then he said, and the impact of your family that you've shared with us. And that was it. And honestly, I was a little bit, I thought maybe he didn't hear my question. I was looking for wisdom, not like appreciating me. And this morning, as I was pondering that, I realized that in his last words to me, he shared the most profound wisdom in his gratitude. Here's a guy, enormous success by the world standards. In his, literally his dying breath, he expressed what he was grateful for that really counted. And that was not the financial capital we made or lost. We lost some too along the way, of course. It was the relational capital. It was the spiritual depth that we shared. And when I think back on some pretty crazy in the trenches war stories we went through as entrepreneurs, it was that held us together. Mm-hmm. Really. Yeah. It was that gave us the resilience. So I just want to encourage you, wherever you're at, if you're an investor, to be thinking about that as you're investing more than your money into the businesses you invest in. As you're an entrepreneur, realize that what we're building here is way more than money. Yeah. And it's that way more than money part that ultimately will make the money worth making.
Yeah. Make the money worth making. Well said. Thank you, Lonnie, Bob. Okay, Lisa, come. Yes. So, yes, yeah. So, Lisa Barnhouse, Executive Director, if you don't know her. So let's now go on to our pitch competition. And there we go. And I want to call up David Lasecki.
We're going to clear out the first row for the pitch competition finalists. You're welcome to, if